What's going on, everyone? We are live with the Noah Gillian Show. So happy you decided to join in today. I am your host, Noah Gillian. Thanks for joining in. It is the 20th of September, 2022, and we are here today to be breaking down the Eagles and Vikings game from Monday Night Football last night, as well as reacting to the rest of the craziness that took place in week 2 in the NFL. Before we get into the show, however, please hit that subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please follow, subscribe. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find our Twitter handles for the show's account right on the screen right here. It is at Noah Gillian or at the Noah Gillian Show on Instagram, at Noah Gillian Show on Twitter, and you can find myself at Noah Gillian on Twitter and on Instagram at Noah Gill1. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, to start off the show today, we are going to be talking about the Eagles and Vikings game that took place last night on Monday night. It was a 24-7 victory for the Philadelphia Eagles to move to 2-0, and they dropped the Minnesota Vikings down to a 1-1 record. It was a very interesting game in terms of not what a lot of people expected. A lot of people were riding high with Minnesota. A lot of people were riding high with Philadelphia coming into the year, and then just even after week 1, especially with Minnesota's dominant victory over the Green Bay Packers, there was a lot of love for them. The Eagles squeaked out a win against Detroit, but looked pretty good. They put up 38 points. So a lot of people were really excited for both units as a whole. And that was reflected by the spread in the game. I believe the Eagles were 2-point favorites. Moved down to, it was moving all over the place. There was a lot of action on this game. It moved toward the Vikings, and then it moved back towards the Eagles. And at the end of the day, the movement didn't really affect anything. The Eagles covered and covered handily in this game. All the points coming in the first half. It was 24-7 at halftime, and no points by either team were scored in the second half, even though both teams threatened on multiple occasions. There was just so much happened here on the Eagles side of the ball. There was a little bit to break down on the Minnesota side of the ball as well. So I guess let's start first off with my major concern from week 1, which was the defense. So the defense in this game was interesting to say the least. Cornerback Darius Slay probably had his best game as a Philadelphia Eagle. He had 2 interceptions and 4 pass breakups. He could have had, honestly, 3 or 4 interceptions as well. He had a couple that went right through his hands. But he was in great position all night. He kind of set the tone, too, on the Vikings' first drive of the game. The Eagles had just scored. The Eagles got the opening possession. They went right down and scored a touchdown. And on the Vikings' first possession, they got to a third down right away, and they dialed up a little dig route for Justin Jefferson, a little comeback right at the sticks, and Slay, may have gotten away with a little hand tug, but broke the pass up and ignited the link. And I think that just totally set the tone for the Eagles' defense for the night. It set the tone for Slay as well. He had a pick deep in the red zone, carding Jefferson again. He had his second interception came one play after he dropped an interception. So he had a couple where he jumped the route and went right through his hands. So he could have had multiple interceptions, but regardless, he was all over the ball. He was anticipating so well. He was breaking up passes. He was in Justin Jefferson's head, it appeared, and just totally shut him down. One of the premier wide receivers in the league. Still had a couple catches, got loose a couple times, but when Darius Slay was on him, there wasn't much to go around, and it was a phenomenal performance from Slay. The one issue I will have with the defensive performance was the defensive line. I mean, there was absolutely zero pass rush coming from the defensive line. We rushed 4 most of the game, which was, Jonathan Gannon came out and said, and this is true of any team, you're going to need to be able to rush 4 and get to the passer in order to play, elite defense in the league, because once you start sending more and more guys, whether it be a blitz or just sending extra guys on the rush, that's when your defensive backfield starts to lighten up, and that's when the offense can start to, overload a side or can pick apart. They have better numbers in the back end of your defense. So if you can get home with 4 guys, it just gives such an advantage to the defense on that side of the ball. And there was absolutely no push. I mean, the Minnesota offensive line is good, but they were throwing our guys around like it was nothing. Josh Sweat had 1 sack late in the game when the game was over pretty much, and he had a sack that pretty much ended the game. And then Fletcher Cox, the first sack of our game, came in with 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Fletcher Cox got in the backfield on a 3rd down and stripped him, a strip stack on Kirk Cousins. Minnesota ended up recovering the ball, but before that, for 3.5 quarters, there was no push. Like, we were sending 4, and it almost seemed like right when they hit the Minnesota offensive line, like, they just stopped in their place. And it was so weird because you're so used to these guys getting in the backfield. There was one play where Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave were racing up the middle, and both of them just got thrown to the ground. And it's just a little concerning when you go out and you pick up Hassan Reddick to improve your pass rush, and you don't really see really much improvement at all. They've been dropping Hassan Reddick. Granted, he is a linebacker, but they've been dropping Hassan Reddick back into coverage a little bit, and it has not been a pretty sight. Let's just put it that way. But even when he's rushing the passer, he's getting close, but we haven't been able to consistently create pressure where you're forcing the quarterback, to throw off his back foot or to hold the ball an extra second, or to try to evade the pressure in front of him. So what does that lead to? That leads to Jonathan Gannon dialing up a few more blitzes than he did in week 1. And this was, I think, a great move from Gannon. I'll get to his overall performance in a sec, but the blitzes were so needed when they were. He dialed up blitzes on a lot of 3rd downs. His first couple were only on 3rd downs, and they got the defense right off the field. So I thought those were phenomenal. A little bit later in the late in the 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, there was one drive on 1st and 2nd down, just sent all out blitzes and 2 incompletions. Just kind of got Kirk Cousins off his game a little bit, out of his rhythm, and we're going to need to be doing that, because if we can't get pressure with our front 4, the blitzes have to come. And granted, Jonathan Gannon did it. I thought it was overall a pretty good performance from Gannon. He had a good game plan. They even mentioned Cousins mentioned in the post-game press conference, and their head coach mentioned in the interview after the first quarter how they were giving him a little bit different defensive looks than they were anticipating. So I thought that was great game planning from Jonathan Gannon, and maybe took a little bit of the heat off the hot seat that he was sitting on, because it was a great performance. And in the second half, the Eagles were not doing the defense any favors. The offense was not doing the defense any favors. I mean, they threw the interception that Hurts had on that little screen dump off. It was just a poor play call. It was a poor decision from Hurts as well, and they picked it off and drove it all the way down to the 10, and they ended up not getting the ball, they ended up not scoring a touchdown. They blocked a field goal, got it all the way down to 30, and ended up throwing in an interception. It was a pretty great performance from the Eagles defense. It was also a very poor performance from Kirk Cousins. His decision making was poor throughout this game. There was multiple plays where he had Justin Jefferson maybe running open in the middle, or he had another guy looping around and just totally didn't look a certain way. Now, granted, his reads might have been to go a certain way, but he did not have the best game decision-making wise, and the Eagles defense absolutely turned it on. We're very opportunistic. Obviously, as shown by the three interceptions, 2 by Darius Slay and 1 by Avonte Maddox. So it was just a ton of good for the Eagles defense, I'll put it that way. A great performance from their secondary. Their linebackers came up for the most part and tackled, forced negative plays. And I think just the only real concern and the only real thing moving forward is just the pass rush. I think that's just going to be one thing that we just need to keep our eye on moving forward. They did have 2 sacks in the game, but that's not really that impressive to me. I mean, you had 1 sack week 1 and 2 sacks in week 2. It's you really need to, even if you're not getting to the quarterback, you need to hit the quarterback. And that's the thing, they weren't even hitting Kirk Cousins. They would sometimes get to him late and put a hand on him or something, but there wasn't many times where he had to stand down the barrel of the gun, throw it, and then someone give him a shoulder and he's on his back. there wasn't very many of those plays during the game. So overall, for the defense, kind of looking at it like we always do from a macro level, I mean, it was a good performance. There was a lot to take from it. The Minnesota offense is explosive, to say the least. I mean, Dalvin Cook, one of the premier running backs in the league, was absolutely held down. I mean, he finished with 6 carries for 17 yards, and he had 4 catches for 19 yards. So, like, you totally limited him in this game. Now, granted, some of that may have been due to the fact that the Eagles jumped out to such a big lead. However, that helps your defense out so much. And then when Dalvin Cook did get the ball, was absolutely stuffed. He had a couple plays where he had like big runs, which accounted for most of his yards, and then most of his other touches were just hitting the wall on the defensive line and falling down. So that's where I will give the defensive line a lot of credit. They definitely showed up in the run game. They really didn't have much rushing going on at all. I mean, they had 62 rushing yards as a team, and Kirk Cousins was their leading rusher. So that should really tell you all you need to know. And just bringing it back, great performance by the defense. Now let's switch to the offense. The offense had a dominant performance in the first half. I mean, I put down it was almost a perfect first half for Philadelphia's offense. They absolutely came out and punched the Vikings in the mouth. Jalen Hurts was phenomenal in this game, absolutely phenomenal. Started the game 10-10, was completing passes effortlessly, was absolutely picking apart the Vikings defense. He ended up finishing the game 26 of 31 for 333 yards, 1 touchdown through the air. He also did throw that interception that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And then he also added 57 yards on 11 carries on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns. So overall, I mean, this was probably the best game of Jalen Hurts' career. I know the game against Arizona last year, he had a lot of, or it may have been 2 years ago. He had a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns through the air. But this was just an all-around best game. He was picking apart the defense. They were sitting in zone pretty much all game, and Troy Aikman was saying it on the broadcast. He just couldn't believe that they were staying in the same coverage the whole game. But credit to Jalen Hurts. He was picking apart every single hole they had. They got Devontae Smith involved early in the game. Devontae ended up with 7 catches for 80 yards. So he really got back involved in the game early, too. He had the first couple catches of the game. Got Dallas Goedert involved, got A.J. Brown involved, got Quez Watkins involved down the field. I mean, you had 4 guys with over 69 yards receiving, all 3 of your wide receivers and your tight end. So just distributing the ball amongst a number of different receivers, being very efficient with the ball in the pocket. And the thing I loved about it, too, was even on 3rd and longs and even on plays where they had a lot to gain to get the first down, he didn't miss the check down. He wasn't like, I need to push this ball down the field. We got to keep the drive going. Like, even if it's 3rd and 13, he says, yeah, okay, I'll dump it down to Miles Sanders. He gets 8 yards, and it makes the punt a little bit better. We're moving a little bit further away from our goal line. It lets us draw a little bit more on the punt. And even like, I just remember, I can think of like 3 or 4 instances where Hurts was running off the field because we had to punt, and Aikman was just like, on the broadcast, he just said, another good decision from Hurts here. Like, another good decision, good read from Hurts. Like, there's some times where the play down the field is just not there, and you just have to jump it down, especially with a lead like the Eagles were playing with, especially how good your defense was playing all night. Trust them, and that you don't need to force a ball downfield where they might get an interception and return it 20 yards, and now you're like, all right, they're on the 30 instead of you punt it away and they're on their own 20. So I think the maturation process of Jalen Hurts has truly, truly begun and is in full swing. I think all the work he did in the offseason to improve his arm has just been so tangible. You can just see it every single snap. The comfort in the offense in a second year, you can see every single snap. Just the connection with him and Sirianni. He made a couple of checks on the line of scrimmage last night where got into different plays, and just it seems that he just has complete control of the offense right now, and that is something you love to see. I've always been a huge huge proponent of just the intangibles that Jalen Hurts brings to the table, and you can just hear it in all his teammates' voices when they're talking about him. And it just appears that as the season goes on, at least from week 1 to week 2, you're just going to see the chemistry improve by leaps and bounds, and you're just going to see, ideally, if you're an Eagles fan, you just want to see that connectivity continue to grow, whereas it's just seamless as the season progresses. So overall, we bring it back to the macro level here, and it was just a phenomenal game overall from Jalen Hurts. I mean, the final score 24-7 was pretty much indicative of how the game went. It could have been a lot more too. I mean, the Eagles, they really were not that effective in the second half, and against a better team and against a team where your defense might not be performing as well, you're going to need to score more than 24 points. Let's not get that wrong, because they could have easily had 30 or more, which they probably should have had, but they just kind of got stagnant in the second half a little bit. They weren't hitting as much down the field. They were really trying to run the ball, which I appreciated. Start draining that clock down. Got to clean up a little bit of the special teams. Obviously, having a field goal blocked is red alert. You don't want to have any kind of leaks in your field goal protection. So that's going to have to be A1 priority this week in the special teams meetings. But, I don't really have much negative things to say about the Eagles this week. Last week, obviously giving up 35 points to the Lions was not ideal. But the fact that you welcome Minnesota in Monday Night Football, national TV, home opener, and you hold them to 7 points, really, really overall phenomenal team effort. So next week they will be welcoming in the Washington Commanders and Carson Wentz. So it's gonna be an interesting matchup. I believe they go to Washington next week. I will let me just excuse me. Let me just double check that to make sure I have the right thing here. Yeah, the Eagles will be in Landover, Maryland, to face the Commanders next weekend. And that's going to be a very, very interesting showdown. Washington's 1-1 this year. They ended up losing to the Detroit Lions last week in Detroit. So the Detroit Lions showed a lot. They showed they have a potent offense. Their defense was active in that game, and they kind of held the Commanders down a little bit. The final score of that game was 36-21. So, an interesting kind of decision there. The Commanders were actually down 22-0 at halftime and scored 22 points of their own, or 27 points of their own, all in the second half. So it will be interesting to see. It's going to be a very, I think, emotional game. Obviously, it's not in Philly, so the fans won't be really amped up for the Wentz return. But I think the Eagles players and the team is going to be amped up, ready to go. I hope they don't start to, think they're smelling too good after this game and, think they're high and mighty, because there's a lot of people on TV, especially just kind of watching it early in the day, that are talking about best team in the NFC, potential Super Bowl team, and I'm not ready to go there yet. I do think there is still teams in the NFC that have the history maybe a little bit more, but the fact you're looking at it, and I mean, they're up there. They are up there. I mean, they are 3 teams with undefeated records: the Eagles, the Buccaneers, and the Giants. Now, granted, the Giants, I think, are a little less for real, and that's nothing against the Giants. I mean, they're 2-0. They deserve to be 2-0. But you squeak out a 19-16 win over Carolina. You're a missed field goal away from losing week 1. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to grow with Brian Dable as their new head coach. But we'll see how that goes. Bringing it back to the NFC picture as a whole. I mean, then you're talking about teams like the Rams at 1-1, the Niners at 1-1. The Niners, you're going to have Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll get into that in a little bit. The Packers are still at 1-1. The Saints are at 1-1. The Cowboys 1-1. Cardinals are at 1-1. Like, there's a lot of teams right there that could definitely jump into this equation. But right now, the Eagles are at the top. They have the second best point differential in the NFC. They've scored the most points out of all NFC teams. And, they're 2-0. And you can only play the teams that are in front of you. So we'll see what happens next week in Maryland for this matchup. I do want to see if I can get an early line on this game. No line to start. Yeah, they haven't put a line out for that game yet. But I think the Eagles should be favored in that game. I'm going to anticipate the Eagles are probably going to be like a 3.5, 4-point favorite in that game. They might even be like a 5-point favorite, but I think the Commanders have shown enough to warrant probably Eagles around 3.5. And honestly, I think they're going to perform very well. Their defense is going to be tested again. The Commanders they have explosion all over. Terry McLaurin on the outside, Jahan Dotson on the outside. Curtis Samuel has had a renaissance season this year. They still got Antonio Gibson in the backfield. Lance Thomas as the tight end. I believe that's their tight end. Athletic freak at the tight end position. And then they have a good offensive line. And behind that offensive line is Carson Wentz. So he's been playing good football this year. He's really taken advantage of the weapons he has. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, you expect Darius Slay to have maybe another good game there. He did pick up a little bit of an injury where he wasn't on the field late in the game yesterday. But hopefully he gets back into it, and the improvements and the momentum of the secondary continue into that game. Their defensive side of the ball, I think they're going to have some issues with Jalen Hurts. Last year, when the Eagles went into Washington, Jalen Hurts had a phenomenal game. It was one of his best games last season, late in the year, and I think he's going to have another similar game going into it next week. So we'll see what happens when the line comes out. We'll probably put a tweet out or something on socials that maybe we have a play for it. So just keep your eyes out there, but overall, just to kind of put a bow on the Eagles' performance in week 2, just a dominant performance, and a lot of people are talking about them. So it's a good place to be if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan. But then again, we are only in week 2, so still plenty of season to go. All right, as we get into the rest of the week 2 reaction, there was a crazy amount of comebacks yesterday. A number of teams up double digits in the fourth quarter who ended up losing those games. A number of great performances statistically, and it was a great week of football. So I did want to go through some of these big games, some notes that I had on some of the monster comebacks, some of the big performances, some of the big primetime games. So we're going to start off with the Dolphins and Ravens game, probably the game of the day on Sunday. The Ravens ended up building a monster lead, and that didn't really matter because the Dolphins came out and they scored 28 points in the fourth quarter and came back and won that game. Honestly, just an unbelievable performance. Tua Tagovailoa had 469 yards passing and 6 touchdowns, one shy of the NFL record. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill both had over 10 catches, 150 yards, and a touchdown. So, both of their guys went off, and that's the number one takeaway I had from this. Is Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle the best wide receiver duo in the NFL? Listen, it's certainly a question to be had. I mean, just off the top of my head, you start to think about some of these combinations. I mean, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins is definitely in the conversation. I'm just trying to think of some off the top of my head here. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen is definitely in the conversation, but I don't think they rival them. And it's really just tough. I mean, what am I going to say? A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith? Not yet. They're not on that level. Even Jalen Waddle is just absolutely performing out of his mind. Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, probably not. Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, it's like they might have, other teams that definitely have guys that are maybe as good as Tyreek Hill, but Jalen Waddle has been just so impressive to me, watching him on film, watching him run. His speed is something that has totally came back after that ankle injury he suffered his last year at Alabama, and it looks like he hasn't missed a step. I was not saying I was down on him coming into the year, but I definitely was a little less excited after they went out and signed Tyreek Hill, but it seems like there's plenty to go around in Miami right now. Mike McDaniels, their head coach, is absolutely dialing it up right now. I think them going down so much definitely gave them the freedom to kind of go for it and take downhill shots. So it's going to be interesting to see when they start to get leads, what happens. Obviously, last week they dominated the Patriots and looked great. I'm not the biggest fan of the Patriots anyway, but you think about it, they have a legit claim to be the best wide receiver duo in the NFL, and I may be forgetting somebody, just off the top of my head as I'm doing this, but honestly, you can't hate on them because both they're the number one and number two receivers right now in terms of receiving yardage in the NFL. So you'd be hard pressed to find a better duo than that. But as we kind of, we'll talk one more spot on the Dolphins before we get to Baltimore here. The Tua excitement was almost predictable. I mean, we talked about this in the preseason, in the season preview show. We said we expect Tua to look a lot better because of the supporting cast. He's someone that, with a great supporting cast, can raise his level of play to look very, very good. Much like in the preseason, we were talking about how Jalen Hurts, we expect his play to jump up with a great supporting cast. And Tua has looked very good, like very, very, very good. And I'm really excited to see how he continues to progress. With all the weapons around him, how he continues to distribute the football, how he continues to deal with the pass rush, how he continues to just be accurate and be mobile and be their franchise quarterback, because I think it'd make it a lot easier for Dolphins fans and Dolphins front office to say, okay, we have our guy. Now let's go fix and work on the rest of the roster. But am I sold on him? I mean, a couple of those throws were pretty good. The one to Tyreek, the second one to Tyreek Hill was a wide open touchdown. The first one was a bomb, and it was pretty much on the money, but Tyreek did have to come back to it a little bit. So, I don't want to nitpick too much. But overall, I mean, he looked great. He had a spin move in the backfield where he shook a defensive lineman and then found someone in the end zone. Like, he was in his bag yesterday. So, a great performance from Tua, obviously a phenomenal performance in Baltimore against a great Baltimore team. So we're going to keep an eye on Miami. I mean, they're up there in the AFC right now. They're the number one team along with the Chiefs and the Bills. I would still slot them behind those teams, obviously, but they're up there. I mean, they have 62 points scored. They're fourth in the conference in points scored. They've beaten Baltimore. They beat New England. So a lot to like from Miami. But I'm not worried about Baltimore in the slightest. I mean, they came out and they scored 35 points in this game. They deserve to win this game, or excuse me, they scored 38 points. I just felt like going back and watching the game again, it just felt like they took their foot off the pedal a little bit, especially defensively. Like, I know you're up so much, like you're up by 21 points, but like they were playing off guys so much that when you get these guys with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, all they need is a little slant route and 5 yards of separation, and they can turn into a 40-yard gain, and they can flip the game on its head like that. So I just thought it was a little passive from their defense to back up so much off the line of scrimmage. I think it really let Miami's offense get going. And then offensively, they kind of ran some plays that really didn't make sense. There was a 4th and 1 at one point where they ran a Lamar Jackson draw out of the shotgun. It's like, get him under center, it's 4th and 1, and bowl forward. And that one just didn't really make sense to me. But I'm not worried about Baltimore in the slightest. I mean, they're 1-1. That was a phenomenal game from Miami. They should be 2-0, honestly. And I think they're going to continue to get better. Lamar Jackson looks absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he went out there and ran for 119 yards and a touchdown yesterday. I think I saw this stat on Twitter yesterday that he has the longest run and the longest throw in the NFL this season of 79 yards and 75-yard rushing. So, I mean, just absolutely going off. This is what we predicted in the season preview show, just a revenge tour type of season from Lamar Jackson and an AFC North championship for them. So, still on pace for that. Leading the division, obviously, with the Steelers and the Browns not really doing too much. I mean, the Browns are 1-1, the Steelers are 1-1, Baltimore's 1-1, so they're still technically in the lead, I believe. And there's still a lot to love about them. So we like Baltimore still here, but all the credit in the world goes to Miami. They had a phenomenal game, and Tua absolutely dominated, as did their star duo of wide receivers. All right, the next game we're going to talk about here is the Tampa Bay and New Orleans game. Just an absolute defensive slugfest in this one. Final score ended up being 20-10. At one point, it was 3-3 in the fourth quarter. Like, this was an absolute defensive slugfest. I mean, Tampa Bay was without Julio Jones and without Chris Godwin in this one, so they were really limited on the outside. Their offensive line is still a work in progress for Tampa Bay, and and their defense showed up. I think that's kind of the most crucial aspect of this game. Tampa Bay's defense absolutely stepped up. There were 6 total turnovers in the game, so it was a defensive battle, but the defensive ratio was totally out of whack. I mean, the New Orleans Saints turned the ball over 5 times, and there was only, put that to 1 turnover for Tampa Bay. The Bucs defense was just way too opportunistic. Not way too opportunistic. They were opportunistic in that they had 3 interceptions off Jameis Winston, 2 fumbles, and just absolutely dominated. I mean, they came out and they, at the end of the game, put the game away. Pick 6 off Jameis, and they ran it in to give them that big lead that ended up. I mean, once you go up 2 possessions in a game like that, it really kind of swung the pendulum in that game. And I did want to talk about the Saints a little bit because they looked okay in week 1. They were down big against Atlanta and had to come back and beat them on a game-winning field goal. This game, they were really struggling to score against a good Tampa Bay defense. And I just think Jameis Winston, really limits the ceiling of New Orleans here. I love Alvin Kamara, one of the best running backs in the league. He also didn't play in this game, so that was probably a factor why they weren't as effective, so I will say that. But, Michael Thomas looks healthy, looks good. Chris Olave looks to be adjusting to the NFL very, very well as a rookie. Jarvis Landry looks to be playing very, very well out of the slot and, just as a veteran wide receiver for New Orleans. And their defense is elite. But it just comes down to me is the ceiling that Jameis Winston provides, I just don't believe is high enough where they can win the NFC South. Once the offense gets healthy around Tom Brady, you can see them start. You can see a world in which they start to click and which they start to be putting up 28, 35 points a game. Whereas New Orleans, if they scored 24 points in a game, I think that's a good week for them. I don't see them putting up 30 too often this season. And I think that's where it really just comes down to, can you really trust Jameis Winston when you need him most? And granted, he has done that before, but he's also coming off an ACL injury. He's still got tendencies to throw the ball into tight coverage when he needs a big throw. And I just think it limits their ceiling. I think they can definitely fight for a wild card. I think by the end of the year, they'll still be around 9-8, right around 500. But I just don't see them pushing the Buccaneers. I mean, the Buccaneers are now 2-0. Even though they only put up 19 and 20 points, they played 2 not great games, but their defense is getting them through this tough stretch of the season where they don't have Godwin. Julio's already out of the lineup. Mike Evans got Mike Evans got thrown out of this game for getting in a fight. So, then you lose Mike Evans for the 4th quarter. Mike Evans probably going to be suspended for next week. Already got suspended for 1 game. He's appealing that suspension, but he's going to lose. Now you have Mike Evans that's going to be suspended for a game. You might not have your top 3 wide receivers. Now you're going to need your defense to really, really step up and get you to where your offense starts to get healthy again and can really start to click. So, again, I just think Tampa Bay dominated this game. This was Brady's first win actually against New Orleans since he's gotten to Tampa Bay. So, out of all the games that, out of all the teams that he's had the last 3 years, I can't believe this was the one that actually ended up going into the Superdome. I'm getting the win, but overall they got the dub. They're 2-0 and they're still in contention for that number 1 seed in the NFC. All right, the next game I wanted to talk about here was the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I don't want to give myself a pat on the back yet, and I don't want to, it's only week 2, but we did think the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to step up this year. Granted, we also had the Colts not running away with this division, but easily winning this division, and they haven't really looked good at all. They got shut out by Jacksonville yesterday. The final score ended up being 24-0. Absolutely atrocious game from the Indianapolis Colts all the way around. Jacksonville's defense went off. They had 5 sacks and 3 interceptions and absolutely made life hell for Matt Ryan. And the reason why we were so high here on the Noah Gillian Show on Jacksonville was because of Trevor Lawrence. He looked really good yesterday. He did throw a couple balls which probably should have been intercepted after we rewatched the tape, but he was dominant. 25 for 30. He had 2 touchdowns and just seemed in total control. He had a couple plays where he rolled out to the left, threw it across his body with the obviously threw it across his body, running to his left on the money passes. Just in the pocket, decisive in the pocket. And Doug Peterson has really been a godsend for that franchise. He has totally revolutionized their offense. He's totally given a pocket that is comfortable for Trevor Lawrence, and he's really showing that potential. So I really think that Jacksonville, after watching Indianapolis for 2 weeks, I think they could contend for a division crown here. I think it's very possible with the defense they have. Their offense, Christian Kirk, looks like a steal at the price they got him at. They gave him 70-something million. A lot of people thought that was an overpay, including this guy right here. And he's looked dominant. I mean, he has absolutely looked dominant in this game. And their running backs look good. James Robinson had a great game, 64 yards and a touchdown. ETN still getting mixed in, still getting used to the NFL game. They still got Marvin Jones on the outside, who's a competent wide receiver. Like, they have weapons, and they have a quarterback who's really coming into his own, and they have a good defense to marry to that too. So let's not jump the gun, but let's really keep an eye on Jacksonville, because they have a good team, and a young team, a hungry team, and a Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson. And obviously, it's really going to, determine what they do the next couple weeks. I'm really interested to see what happens in week 4 when Jacksonville comes to Philadelphia. I think that's going to be a big game. They were talking on the broadcast last night in the Eagles game, like the Eagles kind of have an easy schedule here coming up, but like the Jacksonville game it scares me a little bit, because their offense can keep up, I think. So it's going to be interesting to see there, but I think Jacksonville looking very good. Looking very, very good. I mean, Tennessee is just absolutely in shambles. That's another thing we predicted in our season preview show, that Tennessee was going to fall off the face of the map. And already at 0-2, it looks like they just have no answers on offense at all. So I think Jacksonville is going to really threaten. It was really, really going to threaten that AFC South. And we're going to see what happens with Indianapolis, because like you expected Matt Ryan to come in and totally change the feeling of the franchise with a good quarterback, a former MVP in the NFL, and it just hasn't worked. And it almost leads me to believe, is there a curse with the quarterback position there? I mean, you talk about Phillip Rivers, you talk about Carson Wentz, you talk about Matt Ryan, all competent quarterbacks, one a future Hall of Famer. Matt Ryan, probably not going to make the Hall of Fame, but has put up very, very good career numbers. And then Carson Wentz is a competent quarterback to start for him. You see him, he's doing well in Washington this year. And they just haven't been able to get over the hump. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the deal is. They need a little bit. I mean, they didn't have Michael Pittman Jr. yesterday, so let's be a little bit fair. They didn't have Michael Pittman Jr., their superstar wide receiver. But still, like, you still have Jonathan Taylor. Taylor got absolutely shut down in this game, so he was not even a factor whatsoever. But they need to be able to run the ball to win, and they got down early, and then they weren't able to catch up. So I think once they get their wide receivers healthy, they'll look a little bit better. And once they kind of find their groove, they'll get a little bit better. But if I'm a Colts fan, I'm concerned, and I'm a little bit devastated a little bit to start the season that you've already taken a tie to Houston and a loss to Jacksonville, 2 division games to start the year, and yet you're 0-1-1. Like, that's not where you thought you were going to be. I thought, Colts were going to come out and be 2-0. So to see them at 0-1-1 is a little bit hairy. So we'll see how they kind of bounce back from that and hopefully get back in this division race. All right, I did want to touch real quick on the Jets game, because they had a phenomenal comeback in this one. The Browns were dominating. They were up 14, or they were up 13 with about a minute and some change left, and they ended up giving up a touchdown, a breakdown touchdown to Corey Davis, a big bomb, and then they gave up an onside kick, which then turned into another Jets touchdown. A phenomenal comeback for the Jets. And Garrett Wilson, their first-round wide receiver, 8 receptions for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns, and should have had a lot more than that as well. The Jets are interesting, man. I said that in the preseason. I said that in the intro, like in the season preview episode. Like, Elijah Moore and Garrett Mitchell are 2 blossoming receivers in this league. Breece Hall, their running back as well, and Michael Carter both look good in this one, and their offensive line looked good. Their defense obviously didn't look great, because the Browns probably should have won this game. Not probably, should have won this game. But they just got interesting pieces on the outside. They're going to be able to keep up in games, which is, even for a bad team, I think that's important, to be able to keep up. If you go down, be able to keep up, score some points, and make games interesting. But I did just want to mention them real quick because I really like the pieces they have. I like the drafting they've went out and done, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Zach Wilson comes back because Joe Flacco's been playing very well, and you expect that from a veteran quarterback like Joe Flacco. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Jets are when Zach Wilson comes back, because if he comes back and doesn't play well, I could see Jets fans calling for Joe to come back in, and then as a franchise, you're a little bit concerned because then what's your quarterback situation going into next year? So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to keep tabs on. But, I mean, the Jets got a big win, 1-1 now, and, really kicking in the AFC East. All right, now I wanted to switch to some games in the late window that took place. And the first game I wanted to talk on was the Houston and Denver game. Now, I might have to reassess some things here. I'll be the first one to say it. I did not expect this whatsoever. I do not see any kind of cohesion. I don't see any kind of improvement. Like, for Denver, it is they should not have won this game yesterday. Thank God they had a great pass from Russell Wilson to their tight end, Eric Saubert. But Nathaniel Hackett is under the microscope. There's no doubt about it. I mean, clock mismanagement, timeout mismanagement, red zone efficiency. They haven't scored a touchdown in the red zone all season. 2 games they have yet to score a red zone touchdown, and they've been in the red zone more than 5 or 6 times. And they have yet to score a touchdown. And with guys like Russell Wilson, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, I know Jerry Jeudy left the game, but guys like Jerry Jeudy, Albert Okwuegbunam, you have guys like this, you should not be settling for 3 points every time you get into the red zone. And it comes down to play calling a lot of the fact, but I don't understand your personnel. Russell Wilson is a mobile quarterback, but he's not going to be running around like Kyler Murray anymore in the red zone. And granted, Russell Wilson could have played a lot better yesterday. I mean, he was only 14 for 31 for 219 yards. So, Russell could have played a lot better. I don't want to totally dismiss him, but, there just seems like, we got a delay of games. We got no punt returner coming out on a 4th and 13, and you're getting the punt. Don't send a punt returner out. It just doesn't seem like that team's buttoned up right now. It doesn't seem like that team is in line, ducks in a row. And it's really going to be testy for this team. I mean, luckily they're 1-1. Luckily they beat Houston there. But I'm reassessing. They were my Super Bowl pick. Let me remind all the viewers here if they missed the season preview show. I have them winning the Super Bowl. So am I concerned? Yes, big time, because you expect your situational football to be much sharper. I know it's a new quarterback and a new system, a whole new system for all the offense too, not even just Russell Wilson. So it's going to take some time to get together, but Nathaniel Hackett may even have to think about relinquishing play calling duties to his offensive coordinator at some point during this season to focus more on the higher game management tools in the game, like clock management, like timeouts, all that stuff, field position battle, and not just worry about calling plays offensively. So, I might need to readjust my expectations when it comes to Denver. Kansas City looks phenomenal. I'm going to talk about that game next. That was the Thursday night game, but I'm going to tie that in. Obviously, this one. Kansas City looks great. The Chargers look great. The Raiders obviously blew a big lead on Sunday to the Cardinals. So they're 0-2, which is, a savior for Denver. But it's going to be really interesting. They're going to need to start stringing some wins together and starting to look better when they do it. Because if not, granted, they realistically could be 2-0 now. I mean, you talk about a field goal 3 feet to the right, and they beat Seattle last week. You talk about them going for it on a 4th and 5 with a minute left, and they get it. Maybe you're a little closer for field goal range. You win, you're 2-0. But they're not. They're 1-1, and they haven't looked good doing it. So even if they were 2-0, there would still be some cause for concern with the way they looks. So I just think we just need to readjust our expectations a little bit when it comes to the Denver Broncos, mainly because of the division that they're playing in. And that's going to bring us to the Chargers and Chiefs game. This was actually the game for Thursday night. I'm just going to lump that in here, obviously talking about the Denver Broncos, and then I'm going to talk about the Raiders next. But the Chiefs, they're just proving that they're at the top still. Mahomes and Reed, it doesn't matter if they lost Tyreek Hill. It doesn't matter if they lost Tyrann Mathieu. They're just coming out and they're 2-0. They're putting teams up, or they're putting teams down. I mean, they just blow out the Cardinals, and then they win a tight one at home against a division rival in the Chargers. And, there's just really not much to say because Mahomes looks like an MVP frontrunner. Their running game looks good. Their wide receivers look good. Travis Kelce is obviously at the top of his game. And their defense looks really good. So I think overall there's not too much to say about the Chiefs. They should be a frontrunner in this division. I had them finishing at 2 in this division behind the Denver Broncos. But as of right now, if I really had to pick going forward, what am I going to say? The Denver Broncos and the coach who I'm having concerns about is going to beat Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes? No. I would say that the Chiefs are definitely favored in that division now. Am I backing off my Super Bowl pick? It's way too early to do that. But I will say the Chiefs are probably now the favorite in this division. And that's going to bring me to the Chargers here because I may have a juicy hot take here, but I don't really think it's that hot. I think Justin Herbert is the 3rd best quarterback in the NFL. I do. I think it goes Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Justin Herbert. And when you talk about what you want in a quarterback, you want arm strength, you want mobility, you want size, you want smarts, you want the ability to read defenses, and what you see in Justin Herbert is an A+ in all those categories. I mean, some of the throws that Justin Herbert makes are absolutely beautiful balls. He had one throw against the Raiders last week where he threw it over. He had a receiver running, 2 defenders under him, and 1 over the top, and he just slid it right past the defender's ears, right into the pocket for Keenan Allen. Then this week, 4th down in the 4th quarter. There's around 2 minutes left to go. They need to score, get an onside kick, get the ball back again, and go score. 4th and 1. He throws this ball very similar. One-on-one, he has a little over route. There's one safety up top, but he's coming from the outside over the number. There's a little over route. They have a defender right on his hip under it, and he puts it right by the defender's ear in the pocket. It is such a beautiful throw, and it's just so Justin Herbert. Like, his arm strength is up there with the best. His ball placement is up there with the best. It just looks so easy when he's throwing the ball. And, you bring all these quarterbacks to me, like, and I'm just gonna start going off from my head. Like, if I'm picking right now, like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, or Justin Herbert, like, I don't know, like, and that's where it gets tough for me, because if you're talking about for this year only, I can definitely see you taking Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady over Justin Herbert. But the fact that Justin Herbert gets hit yesterday, breaks rib cartilage, that they came out after the game, stays in the game, or he missed the play, came back in, and then delivers that kind of dime. Then on another 4th down in the red zone, goal to go, delivers a touchdown in the back of the end zone. Like, I think this kid is just so special. I think he's going to win an MVP in the future. He is, I already think, the 3rd best quarterback in the league. He is in that category with Josh Allen, with Patrick Mahomes. I think he is definitely in that conversation. At the very worst, he's the 5th best quarterback in the league. If you want to throw guys like Brady and Rodgers and all that up there, I'll give it to you. But Herbert, to me, is the 3rd best quarterback in the league. Even in a losing effort, they're not there without him. Absolutely not there. If you put any other quarterback in that spot outside of a couple of the elite guys, like, he is doing things that should not be able to be done from the quarterback position. So overall, they ended up losing this game, but I come away from that game encouraged. It will be interesting to see what the injury to his rib cartilage, how it affects his game. They just said he's day-to-day, so, and he had the little bit of extra time to recover for the game on Sunday with them playing on Thursday night last week. So we'll see how that kind of grows, but even in a loss, I came away from that game just so impressed by Justin Herbert. Next game I'll talk about here is the Raiders and Chargers game. The Raiders and Cardinals game. Ridiculous game here. The Raiders were up big time, and the Cardinals ended up scoring 16 points in the 4th quarter. They scored 2 touchdowns and 2-point conversions. Well, the last one was with 0 seconds on the clock, and then they go into overtime. They get the ball first, and Marquise Brown drops a beautiful ball from Kyler Murray, and they have to punt the ball away. And then the Raiders fumble the ball, and the Cardinals take it all the way back for a game-winning walk-off touchdown. I don't really think there's a lot to take away from this game, however, though. I thought the Cardinals were going to be very, very explosive offensively, but susceptible defensively. I had them as a wild card team. It was a big win for them. I guess I'm a little bit shocked that the Raiders were not able to continue to march down the field and score. I mean, they put up 20 points in the first half, and they weren't really able to do much in the second half. So I guess that's a little bit concerning to me. But I also did have the Raiders finishing at 4th in the AFC West. So to see them starting 0-2, losing to the Chargers and the Cardinals, not super surprising for me. But overall, the game itself, I mean, if you talked to me in the fourth quarter, I would have been like, wow, the Raiders, they're legit. And they still are. I don't want to say that the final score totally changes my opinion on it. But the Cardinals earned that win. They really did earn that win. And how they played late, they deserved it. How they played for the first 3 quarters, they probably didn't deserve it. But the resiliency and just the impact of having Kyler Murray on your team. If you saw some of the moves he made, just the scrambling, he made the 2-point conversion. I mean, I'm pretty sure he ran around for 80 yards. They tracked him. He ran around for 80 yards, just weaving all in and out. Touchdown. Okay. Then next one, I'll throw a 2-point conversion on the money. No problem about it. So overall, great performance from the Cardinals. Good performance from the Raiders, but they just come up a little bit short in the end. All right, I did want to touch on the Bengals and Cowboys real quick, just to kind of start to wrap up the show. Bengals are an interesting team. I think they fooled a lot of people last year, and maybe fooled's not the right word, but I think a lot of people just really thought that they were just going to come back and be a great team again this year. But let's not forget what happened last year. Like, they were a 500 team in November, and then they got hot and they won a bunch of games down the stretch and won the division, got hot in the playoffs, got some breaks along the way, but made it all the way to the Super Bowl, and we're in the fourth quarter with the Rams with a chance to win it. But like that whole run, Joe Burrow was getting knocked around, sacked at historic levels. You had a rookie wide receiver in Jamar Chase. Before Joe Burrow got there, Zach Taylor was on the hot seat as their head coach. And there was a lot of pressure on them coming into this year. It seemed like a lot of people were like, you guys are idiots. How are you taking other teams over the Bengals to come out of the AFC? And it's like, well, I know they improved the offensive line, but number one, they didn't play together at all during the preseason. So what, they're just going to step in day one and be an elite offensive line? No. Number two, they had a phenomenal run down the stretch, but like they didn't do that over a full season. You're expecting them a 2-month run to be extrapolated out of the entire season and for them to just be an elite team. They're playing in a very tough division. Let's not forget, with an elite team in Baltimore in there as well, who we have winning the NFC North on the Noah Gillian show. And we were a little bit, bearish on the Bengals coming into the season this year. And I don't want to take a victory lap already because they very much could have won this game. The Cowboys went up 17-3, and then the Bengals were kind of chipping away, and it took a last-second field goal by the Cowboys to even win this game. So I don't want to just go out there and just say the Bengals are terrible and they're not going to figure it out, because Joe Burrow is a great quarterback. Jamar Chase is an elite wide receiver. T. Higgins is a very good wide receiver. Joe Mixon, elite running back. Their offensive line, in theory, should be better. Their defense, looked pretty good. They got punched in the mouth by the Cowboys, but then really turned the faucet off in the last 3 quarters. And I think they're still going to look really good. They're starting off 0-2, so those omens aren't great for the Bengals. But, I just think we need to be, we temper it. I still think they finish around 9-8, 10-7. I don't think they run, I think they finished at 10-7 last year and won the division. So I could see them right around the same area, right around 500 come Thanksgiving, and then maybe getting hot down the stretch. But it's going to require a lot more time. It's going to require a lot more reps for that offensive line to get going and to really get in a flow, because I think everyone can agree, if Joe Burrow keeps getting hit like he's getting hit, he's not going to survive the season. And on the Cowboys side of thing, I did want to give some credit to Cooper Rush. 19-31, 235 yards, a touchdown, was calm, cool, collected with the football. Gave Cowboys fans some hope that they might not be as far behind in the NFC East as, they might be if he was not going to be good, with obviously Dak getting injured. Still, ability to keep their head above water. I think they found their success plan in the run game. I think they really need to go through their running backs, both Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, and they really just need to continue to hammer it, because if he can be calm with the ball, if he can be safe with the ball, that's all you can really ask for Cooper Rush. He looked comfortable. This is a guy who started a game last year for Cowboys. Like, he's been in the system for a couple years now, and he knows where to go with the football. Now, granted, next week is going to be a tough matchup. Monday Night Football, the Giants hosting the Cowboys next week. The Giants are 2.5-point favorites. It's only a 39.5-point over-under, so it should be a defensive slugfest in the Meadowlands. So it's going to be a tough one. But granted, I think they have a good chance to win that game only because Cooper Rush is safe with the ball. I'm not as high on the Giants, and it's a divisional game. Like, those types of games tend to favor the under, and especially these types of teams who want to run the football and they want to be safe with the football. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I don't really think that Cooper Rush is all that good necessarily, but I think he's better than a lot of people anticipated, and he'll keep the Cowboys afloat at least until Dak Prescott gets back. All right, the last game of our reaction to Week 2 I did want to touch on was the 49ers and Seahawks game. Now, the final score was 27-7 for the 49ers, but a big thing happened in that game, and that was Trey Lance suffering a season-ending ankle injury. So, reaction to that, fallout from that. Jimmy Garoppolo was re-signed to be the backup, was unable to be traded by the 49ers in the offseason, and I'm sure John Lynch is thanking his lucky stars that they didn't trade him, because now Jimmy Garoppolo steps into the starting role. He will be the starter for the rest of the year because of the significance of Trey Lance's ankle injury. It was a similar injury to Dak Prescott's ankle injury, if anybody can obviously remember. That was a gruesome injury on national TV. So it was a similar thing. There was a fractured fibula. There was tendon issues. It's just a complete snap of the ankle. So Trey is going to be back for next year, but he will not see 2022 football for the rest of the season, obviously. And Jimmy Garoppolo steps right in. And honestly, I feel terrible for Trey Lance. The kid got drafted by this franchise. They traded so much to get him. Was still really raw, still very new to this game of football. I mean, I mentioned it in the season preview. He played one game in the last season of his college career. Obviously, with COVID happening in that season 2020, he only played one game. He gets drafted. He plays in the NFL last year. He starts 2 games, but pretty much is backing up Jimmy Garoppolo all year. And then this season, we come in, San Francisco saying, we're trading Jimmy. We're going to go with Trey Lance. He's our starter. And the confidence with that, I can't even imagine getting that confidence from your head coach. And then you're playing a monsoon in Chicago. You get beat by a Chicago team where you probably should have beat them. And then you come out in Seattle. You look pretty good. You're looking all right. And then something like that happens. I just feel terrible for the kid. He was developing. He was looking better. But overall, their prospects for the 2022 season as a San Francisco 49er, it didn't decrease, I don't think, at all. And it may have even increased slightly. I think it would probably stay a little bit similar, but you know what you have in Jimmy Garoppolo. This is a guy who went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. This is a guy who went to the NFC Championship game last season. Is he perfect? Is he one of the best quarterbacks in the league? No, but he's a locker room guy. Everybody seems to love him in San Francisco. And he knows where to go with the football, and he's been in this system for years. So now I think the comfort level between Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo can come back. The awkwardness is kind of the elephant in the room is kind of out of the room now. And, you get George Kittle probably back next week. Deebo Samuel obviously is looking good. They don't have Elijah Mitchell anymore, but they always find running backs to replace there. They still have Trent Williams and that offensive line. Their defense has still looked really good. So San Francisco, I think, is still going to be a very good team. I had them as a wild card team in the season preview episode. So overall, now with Jimmy Garoppolo, I think they're arguably more dangerous this year, but next year it's going to be tough because Trey Lance is losing out on all these reps. So you're almost going to be restarting where you were this year, next year, and everybody's going to be a year older. So it's going to be interesting to see. Overall, though, San Francisco, I believe, should be a formidable foe moving forward. All right, guys, that is going to wrap up the episode today. Please follow us on social media. Our handles for the show's account are right here. Our Instagrams, our Twitter handles are going to be in the description below, so please hit us with the follow. And for myself, Noah Gillian, for the Noah Gillian Show, really appreciate you guys tuning in, and we can't wait to see you back here again next time.